this model is right here. This is the neuron. If we take this part off and we flip it around, it goes right there. So this is part of it, this is the other part of it. And the neuron is the functional unit of the nervous system, and it carries the impulses. It's a very fast acting thing. It's going to carry the impulses. And the message is always going to come in the sensory side. These little gray things are the dendrites. So sensory information comes in the dendrites. It goes into the cell body. The whole thing is the cell body. Has a little golf ball in the middle, that's the nucleus. So sensory information comes in these gray things. And then it goes in and it gets processed or integrated in the cell body. And then it's going to leave the axon. And the axon is this orange line coming down here. It's going to leave the axon. So sensory approaches in the dendrites, gets processed, and it exits out the axon. Those are the three parts of the neuron. That's the functional unit. How we get sensory in and how we get motor out. That lives in the brain, it lives in the spinal cord, and then out in the nerve tissue. That's the neuron. It's the functional unit. It carries those electrical signals. It's our electrical wiring all throughout our system. Sensory in, motor out. And then the axon, we're going to take and wrap it up. We're going to insulate it, and what we call it when we do that is myelination. So these individual white things are the myelination. It's kind of like a hot dog in a bun. The hot dog is the axon, and we put a bun around it. That's the myelin sheath. What forms the myelin sheath, if we're out in the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, is this little pink thing, or if we look at it on the side right there, that's called a Schwann cell. And Schwann cells are the cells that make the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. So the pink thing is the Schwann cell, and what it does, it starts wrapping around the axon in like a jelly roll fashion. It wraps around and around and around. The Schwann cell makes the myelin sheath. We have dips in between. That's called the node of Ranvier. Node of Ranvier. The nodes are there because when we send this electrical impulse down, now that it's myelinated, myelination increases the speed of conduction, it protects it, and it insulates the axon. So it's doing several things there. And we have those dips in between, and when the electrical impulse is coming down, or we'll call that action potential, when it comes down, it jumps from node to node to node. So that speeds up the conduction. If I said we're all going to line up and run to building 1, off we go. If I said we're going to put trampolines between here and building 1, we can leapfrog over there and we're going to get there quicker. It's the same thing with the nodes of Ranvier. And the word for that is saltatory conduction. That's how it moves from node to node to node. More on that in lecture. But the myelin sheath protects the axon, it insulates it, and it increases the speed of conduction. And depending on what the size of the axon is as well, the fibers, we can go from 2 miles an hour unmyelinated to about 238 miles an hour myelinated. So it's a huge difference in impulses. That's why if we put our hand on a hot stove, we pull it away immediately, because we have those myelinated fibers that carry that impulse so quickly. And it's sort of reflex. We do it, we don't even think about it. So myelination allows for things to travel very quickly. The outermost covering of that myelin sheath, just like we have in a cell, we have the plasma membrane, plasma lemma. We have the neurolemma. Neuro having to do with the nervous system. That outermost covering of the myelin sheath is the neurolemma. So it's kind of like a peanut M&M. The outer coating is the shell, that's the neurolemma. The chocolate is the myelin sheath, and what we're surrounding is the peanut or the axon. It's kind of like a 3-layer thing. So just in the peripheral nervous system, we have that outermost layer, which is called the neurolemma. And that's important because the neurolemma allows for nerves to repair and regenerate themselves. And we only have that out in the periphery. We don't have that in the brain and the spinal cord. We have that ability out here with the peripheral nervous system. That's the neurolemma. So this is the neuron model. Has 3 main parts. Cell body is the whole thing. Dendrites, sensory comes in, gets processed, goes out. The motor impulse goes out the axon. We're going to wrap that axon up with a Schwann cell. We're going to roll it up. That's called the myelin sheath. The outermost covering of that's the neurolemma. And if we look at the end, the axon is the orange thing. The Schwann cell wraps it up, and that's the white circle. It's going around and around and around and around. That's your neuron. That's the functional unit. That's how things get in and how things get out. Does that make sense?
So the Schwann cell is the sheath, but only found in plants.
The Schwann cell makes the sheath.
The Schwann cell
Makes the sheath. And the Schwann cell makes that myelin sheath only in the peripheral nervous system.
Okay.
We also have a myelin sheath in the central nervous
But it's
system,
not called a Schwann cell.
but it's called, right, it's called the oligodendrocyte. Yes. So if you've gotten that far in lab, we've talked about that, or in lecture, we've talked about that. All right.